Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about the old god Yogg-Saron in World of Warcraft lore. As with all my videos, if there's anything that I mention, if you want to know more about, links to those are going to be in the description if I've done videos on them. From the beginning, the primordial force of the Void has been trying to consume and twist reality into a realm of darkness. Entities formed within the Void, which work to this end, the Void Lords. They watched the Titans and envied their power, and concluded, in order to twist the universe into a realm of darkness, they needed to corrupt one of the Titans. Through tremendous effort, the Void Lords began seeping into the physical universe. Their goal was to infect a Titan before it had awakened, also known as World Souls. Some worlds in this universe contain sleeping Titans, but the Void Lords didn't know which ones. So they pooled their power together to create dark creatures and thrust them into the universe in random directions, hoping some would land on a world with a world soul. They would corrupt worlds they landed on, whether they had a Titan in them or not. During Azeroth's primordial era, while the elementals still controlled the world, the old gods plummeted down from the sky. They slammed into the surface of Azeroth and embedded themselves in the world. They were mountains of black flesh, tentacles, and eyes. They worked to spread their corruption across the world and dug in their tendrils, digging towards the heart of Azeroth, its world soul. The old gods, Y'Shaarj, C'Thun, N'Zoth, and Yogg-Saron, formed the Black Empire and went to war against the elemental lords of Azeroth. However, no matter how many old gods' servants died, more would spawn, and the war would end with the elementals enslaved to the old gods. The Black Empire spread unopposed, making the world a place of darkness and suffering. While Y'Shaarj was the strongest, they controlled the bulk of the empire. N'Zoth, C'Thun, and Yogg-Saron would war with each other for the remnants of the world. When Aggramar of the Titans found Azeroth and reported to the Pantheon, they were horrified. They were afraid of harming Azeroth further by intervening themselves, so they created the Titan Forged, which were stone and metal beings. Some of these Titan Forged were given the likeness and powers of some of the Titans themselves. They were the Keepers. The Titan Forged and the Keepers made war on the Old Gods and the Black Empire. They attacked Y'Shaarj first, but could not defeat him. So Aman'Thul decided it was worth the risk to rip its body from Azeroth. However, the Old God's tendrils were deeper into Azeroth than the Titans thought, and it left a massive scar on the surface of Azeroth. To avoid damaging Azeroth further, they decided on imprisoning the other Old Gods rather than ripping them out. First, imprisoning N'Zoth and C'Thun. Lastly, the Titan Forged and the Keepers set their sights on Yogg-Saron. This old god would not fall as easily. Yogg-Saron unleashed his strongest generals, the Kith'ix, monstrous and smart Naraki. They whipped the remnants of the Black Empire into a frenzy and swarmed the Titan Forged on all sides. By the time they reached Yogg-Saron, the Titan Forged were battered and broken. The Keeper Odyn rallied the remaining Titan Forged and launched a counterattack. He commanded Keeper Loken to weave an illusion for the Kith'ix, and Yogg-Saron to see themselves as the enemy. The Black Empire began attacking one another, and the Titan Forged pushed in, led by Odyn, and they were able to pacify the Old God. Like the other Old Gods, they buried Yogg-Saron beneath the earth, locked away in an enchanted prison. Yogg-Saron would have killed all the Keepers in Titan Forge that day, if it wasn't for Odyn and Loken's actions. 6 Watchers would be assigned to serve as wardens for Yogg-Saron's prison. Loken, Thorim, Hodir, Tyr, Mimiron, and Freya. Odyn then oversaw the creation of the Forge of Wills in the Storm Peaks, which would draw on Azeroth's essence to create creatures of living stone and metal. He would also be appointed the Prime Designate by the Titan Pantheon for his valorous deeds in the war with the Old Gods. Odyn's job would be to maintain the Forge of Wills and watch over Yogg-Saron's prison. He and the Titan Forge then crafted the Fortress of Ulduar around the Forge and the prison, and would serve as the primary bastion for the Titan Forged on Azeroth. Over eons, Yogg-Saron devised ways to escape his imprisonment. The plan was to corrupt the Forge of Wills and taint it with a disease called the Curse of Flesh. Any Titan Forged made in the Forge of Wills from then on would fall victim to it and spread it to other Titan Forged. This curse would gradually transform these powerful stone and metal beings into weak beings of flesh, mortals who the old god thought could easily be killed. In order to implement the plan, he turned to Keeper Loken. Loken was the one who was most troubled by the Titan Pantheon's silence. Yogg-Saron corrupted Loken's dreams, stoking the Keeper's uncertainty. As Loken fell deeper and deeper into despair, he found comfort in the Vrykul Sif, the partner of Keeper Thorim, and a forbidden love blossomed between them. Yogg-Saron took hold of this love and turned it into an obsession through Loken's dreams. Loken more and more talked about professing their love for each other, which Sif opposed, because if Thorim knew about the affair, it would shatter the Keeper's unity. This drove Sif to break ties with Loken. Losing Sif drove Loken into madness, and in a fit of jealousy, he killed her. Loken panicked, and he looked for a way to cover up Sif's death. An image of Sif's spirit, created by Yogg-Saron, appeared before Loken, and warned him of needing to hurry before Thorim discovered what happened, so that the Keepers wouldn't descend into civil war. Loken sensed something dark within Sif's spirit, but his fear overcame his good judgment. Loken dragged her corpse to the Storm Peaks, and convinced Thorim that her death was caused by Arngrim, king of the Ice Giants. Thorim, in his grief, killed Arngrim and many of the Ice Giants. This erupted a massive war between Thorim's Storm Giants and the Ice Giants. While the Giants' conflict continued, Sif's spirit convinced Loken to make an army of his own through the Forge of Wills, large enough to protect Ulduar from the Giants. While Loken did this, the false Sif slipped the Curse of Flesh into the Forge of Wills, into the machine's creation matrix. The image of Sif then convinces Loken to blame Thorim for starting the war and letting emotion rule him, and that Sif would be ashamed of Thorim's actions. This condemnation threw Thorim into a depression, and he abandoned Ulduar to live in solitude. With Thorim gone, Loken used his army to overwhelm the Giants and end their conflict. When Loken looked to his warriors, he saw something dark and wrong with them. When Loken reached out to Sif for help, she remained silent this time. Loken then realized that it was not the spirit of Sif at all, but an illusion created by Yogg-Saron. Loken had been played as a pawn. Loken became obsessed with keeping it a secret, even if it meant embracing Yogg-Saron. With Yogg-Saron's help, he could destroy the rest of the Keepers and destroy evidence of his wrongdoing. Yogg-Saron succeeded in corrupting a Keeper. Loken would work to neutralize the other Keepers, using shadowy power granted to him by Yogg-Saron. Loken engineered an explosion in Mimiron's lab to look like an accident, but Mimiron's soul was saved by his Mechagnome followers, who made a vessel for his soul to stay in. Loken then sealed Odyn and the Valarjar away in the Halls of Valor by convincing the Titan-forged Helya to do so. Then, Loken fought Freya to a weakened state, which Yogg-Saron seized, compelling Freya to withdraw into Ulduar to tend to the garden in the heart of the fortress. He then did the same with Hodir, with the help of the fire giants Ignis and Volkhan, and Yogg-Saron forced Hodir to retreat into a frozen chamber of Ulduar in seclusion. Keeper Tyr had witnessed Loken's attack on Hodir, and was convinced darkness had taken over Loken's mind. Tyr gathered Keeper Archaedas and the Titan-forged Ironaya, and they spied on Loken's schemes. Loken altered the machines in Ulduar to recognize him as the prime designate of Azeroth, then sealed off Ulduar. Loken would live in Ulduar with fear that the Titans would find out about his actions, or their watcher, Algalon. Now, no longer under the eyes of his watchers, Yogg-Saron began to work itself free of its prison. When the Earthen came under attack by Loken's minions, specifically the Winterscorn Vrykul and the fire giants Ignis and Volkhan, the Keepers came to their aid. Tyr, Archaedas, and the Titanforge Watcher Ironaya aided the Earthen and helped them construct defenses, but in the second attack, they were defeated and helped the surviving Earthen escape. The dragon aspects came to their aid as well. Ysera and Nozdormu used their powers to ultimately put the Winterscorn Vrykul to sleep. After fighting that Winterscorn War, Tyr turned his attention to Loken. Tyr decided that he needed to take action against Loken, or Azeroth would descend into chaos. When Tyr, Archaedas, and Ironaya stole the Disc of Norgannon, which contained all the information on everything that had happened on Azeroth, including Loken's betrayal, Loken panicked and turned to two of Yogg-Saron's most powerful minions, the Kith'ix, Zakaj, and Kith'ix. Loken had excavated the cave where they were sealed and brought them back to life. He used the darkness that was within him to order the Kith'ix to kill Tyr and his allies. Tyr ended up sacrificing himself to save Archaedas and Ironaya to defeat these Kith'ix. Over the next few thousand years, the curse of flesh took hold of the Titanforged. Vrykul would turn into humans, Earthen would turn into dwarves, Mechagnomes would turn into gnomes. The Tol'vir, Mogu, and giants would also suffer a similar fate as their Titanforged brethren. After the Aqiri war with the Trolls, some of the Aqir settled in the north, near the prison of Yogg-Saron. These Aqir would evolve into Nerubians, and their kingdom would be Ajal Nerub. After the War of the Ancients, the world split apart in the Sundering. This destruction of the primary continent of Azeroth shook and damaged the prisons of all of the old gods. Their corruption began seeping into the world's surface over the next thousands of years. In Northrend, where Yogg-Saron was imprisoned, had the most severe effects. A new mineral, Serenite, the essence of the old god, spread throughout the land, sapping the life from plants and animals in the region. Serenite was called the black blood of Yogg-Saron by the Tuskarr. Anyone who was repeatedly exposed would become violently insane. The Cenarion Circle knew this needed to be dealt with, and knew that the energies of the World Tree could heal the land. Fandral Staghelm was obsessed with this idea, and went on with it, without consulting the dragon aspects or the rest of the druids. They cut branches from the World Tree Nordrassil, and planted 6 branches at locations where Serenite had the strongest concentrations, including Ashenvale, Crystalsong Forest, Feralis, Duskwood, and the Hinterlands. The trees quickly took root, and acted like conduits, channeling the powers of the Emerald Dream into the physical world, which strengthened the wildlife and scoured many Serenite deposits. Seeing their success, Fandral planted the last of the branches in the mountains of Northrend. It would grow into the World Tree Andrasil, or Crown of the Snow. The spread of the Serenite stopped, and the wildlife was strengthened. The other druids, including Malfurion, were furious this was done without their approval. But it was successful, and Andrasil stood over Northrend for several decades. Suddenly, bloody battles erupted between the nearby Tonka and Forest Nymphs, 2 races who rarely war. The druids found that Andrasil's roots reached so far down into Azeroth that it had touched Yogg-Saron's prison, and it had been infusing the tree with void energies and corrupting the surrounding area. Since the dragon aspects didn't bless it, the tree was vulnerable to corruption. The druids destroyed Andrasil, and they would refer to the World Tree as Vordrasil, or Broken Crown. Unknown to the druids, however, Yogg-Saron had used his connection to the World Tree to form a connection between the Emerald Dream and the Old Gods, to spread their seeds of corruption into the realm. This was the beginning of what would become known as the Emerald Nightmare. The Grizzlemaw Furbolgs came in to inhabit Vortisil's stump, and were affected with the remnants of Yogg-Saron's corruption. They became murderously insane, and worked to regrow the tree. Also, they attempted to use the remaining power within the tree's stump to resurrect Ursoc, who returned as a twisted version of his former self, and had to be put down. While the Horde and Alliance were preoccupied in Outland, Cho'Gall ventured to Northrend and infiltrated Ulduar. Yogg-Saron had long corrupted the Keepers within, so they did nothing to stop Cho'Gall. Cho'Gall chipped away at Yogg-Saron's bonds, but while he weakened them, he could not totally break them. This increased Yogg-Saron's influence tenfold, and rather than just influencing the Keepers, he solidified their hold over them. Yogg-Saron had Loken create the Old God a massive army from the Forge of Wills. Metal-skinned Earthen and Vrykul came out of the machine, who thirsted for war. Cho'Gall would leave Northrend to try and give the Old God as much time as possible, and to drive a wedge between the Horde and the Alliance. To loosen and release the bonds further, an unknown being, likely a member of the Infinite Dragonflight, traveled back in time to artificially age the lock that sealed Yogg-Saron, which released him around 40 millennia early. Deep underneath Northrend is Ank'Het, the Nerubians' old kingdom. Because of its depth, Yogg-Saron's tendrils were exposed and was able to reach its corruption into this old kingdom, enslaving many of the native beasts, as well as some Nerubians. Yogg-Saron planned on adding them to his army. Herald Volage was sent by Yogg-Saron to quell the Nerubians and kill the Nerubians who were foolish enough to fight against them. The Scourge mined extensively for leftover Serenite and used it in weapons, armor, and even buildings like Icecrown Citadel. While the Horde and Alliance made war on the Lich King, one of the founders of the Explorers League, Bronn Bronzebeard, came to Ulduar seeking knowledge of the origin of the dwarves. Bronn barely escaped Ulduar with his life, and notified Ronan and the Kirin of Yogg-Saron. Ronan gathered King Varian of the Alliance and Warchief Thrall and Garrosh Hellscream to discuss the threat. Garrosh and Varian almost came to blows, and would have killed each other if Ronan did not intervene. Alliance heroes escorted Bronn back to Ulduar, where they entered the Halls of Stone, and slew Solnir, the Iron Shaper, the architect of Yogg-Saron's metal army, denying the Old God the ability to continue making more soldiers. Meanwhile, the Horde infiltrated the Halls of Lightning, where they slew Loken. In his final moment, Loken stated that his death would herald the end of Azeroth. The Explorers League and the Kirin were able to convince members of the Horde and Alliance to join them in an assault on Ulduar, and they had seen the evil within Ulduar and understood it needed to be checked. They fought through Yogg-Saron's metal army and the Keepers that were corrupted there. However, the adventurers did reach the prison chamber of Yogg-Saron, where the Old God assaulted their minds. Some were lost to insanity, as Yogg-Saron turned them against their allies. However, the mortals prevailed and killed Yogg-Saron, and its hold over Ulduar vanished. During this encounter, the heroes were exposed to 3 visions of Azeroth's history, which Yogg-Saron had influence in crafting. These events were the assassination of King Lane by Garona Half-Orcan, the creation of the Dragon Soul by Neltharion, and the torturing of Bolvar Fordragon by the Lich King. During the assault, Bronn Bronzebeard discovered that Loken had not been lying when he said his death would mean the end of the world. The Forge of Origination to the far south would destroy life on Azeroth if it succumbed to the corruption, and then it would start a process so life could start anew. To oversee this, the Titans made the Constellar Algalon, the Observer, to judge the state of Azeroth and decide if the world needed to be scoured. Loken's death had summoned Algalon to Ulduar, and concluded that if Old God corruption had spread to places like Ulduar, then the world needed to be scoured. Azeroth's heroes fought to stop Algalon, but even if he died, it would not stop the Forge of Origination's process. In the end, they made Algalon yield, as he was moved by their resolve to save the world. Life on the other worlds he had purged did not fight as desperately to save themselves. Algalon reversed the failsafe and decided the mortals earned the right to save the world themselves, and they had already proved they could by killing Cthulhu and Yogg-Saron. Algalon then disappeared to continue observing Azeroth. Little did Algalon or the heroes know, one of the last steps to the Forge of Origination's process was for the Titans to give the final approval to eradicate life. That final approval would have never come, as they were slain by Sargeras of the Burning Legion ages ago. While Yogg-Saron was dead, its deeds would continue to influence Azeroth. The connection Yogg-Saron made to the Emerald Dream would be used by the last original Old God, N'Zoth, who would expand the Emerald Nightmare as a way to take over Azeroth. Sylvanas even used the Serenite spikes of Icecrown to kill herself, thinking the Old God's remains would grant her a final death, even destroying her soul. Unfortunately, this led to her meeting the jailer and hatching plans of their own. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on other social media platforms, links above me and in the description. And if you hear whispers in your head, go see a doctor. Probably an old god. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.